With that resume, I was asked this morning to answer a question. With everything that's been done in autonomy and automation, what's left for ag equipment? And if we could have the drum roll, please. The answer is nothing and everything. So hopefully I can explain that in the next 15 minutes. First, some definitions. So I look at innovation as being the combination of invention and application, where application is typically commercialization or in-house use, such as manufacturing. And then invention is really a spectrum of creative activities, ranging from textbook designs on the one end to the first of a kinds like the Wright aircraft. And then in the middle, I've marked this fuzzy area as patentable. And today I'm going to be using the word patentable more broadly than the US legal definition. And so I'm going to use it to refer to things that are novel, that is not a copy of something that's already out there, and something that is non-obvious, that is something that a person with skill in the particular subject matter area would not come up with for a solution using some existing components. And so if an invention is on the patentable side, that is between the patentable and first ever side of the spectrum, and it qualifies under US patent law for subject matter, there's some good benefits that come from that. Namely that it prevents others from making, using, or selling that invention. And you can also legally get some protection that way with trade secrets as long as they're kept secrets. So there's a business benefit from something being on that right side of the spectrum. But then there is also a practical purpose this morning, which is identifying things which are pushing the state of the art. And so with those definitions, let's take a look at the nothing part of my answer. And that is that the forms that have been in use today have been around for quite a while. And this is thinking about what I call industrial monoculture. So that's where you go out, prepare a field, put in a single crop, take care of it, harvest it. And so if we take a look at some of these earlier forms, there was work at Stanford University in the 1960s that looks a lot like a lot of the weeding robots that are out today. You go back to 1994, that was kind of a critical period for automation and precision agriculture. So at NDSU, master's student Todd Besnick wrote a thesis on using camera images to identify weeds. And there was a company in town, Phoenix International, now John Deere Intelligent Solutions Group, that manufactured a weed-activated sprayer system. And so it was optical sensors that would detect weeds against a fallow background and then activate the spray nozzle. Also in the early 1990s, the GPS constellation was completed. There were a number of sensors developed, and so the components of the 1990s autonomous tractors are very similar to the ones today. And even if you think about something that might seem newer like UAVs, autopilots started appearing in the 1910s, the first quadcopter in the 1920s, and the first takeoff, fly, and land fixed-wing UAV flights in the 1940s. And so this is kind of a narrow, pessimistic look at the landscape. It's like, well, it's all been done before. But I think a key takeaway here is that, as you're here at Big Iron and you're looking at displays, you're hearing presentations, a key question to ask is, what is different about the particular robot or UAV that is making it different? What barriers is it helping transcend? What problems is it trying to transcend that these earlier products did not? So let's get into the more optimistic and perhaps more interesting part of the answer, which is everything. And I am not an out-of-the-box thinker. I am an in-the-box thinker, and I manage the boxes. There's a whole presentation I could give on that approach, which is based on what's called the closed world assumption from systematic inventive thinking. But this is a key slide because it captures my thinking, my perspective, and so we'll be working with these boxes for the rest of the presentation. So we started out with the industrial monoculture, and the key barriers are commercialization barriers. And as we were hearing from our farmer panel earlier today, trust is a big issue. And from a 2019 presentation I gave at Cultivate, unless you're trusting something 100% of the time, you're going to rely on it 0% of the time. Well, that's not quite right. The ceiling could collapse on me, the platform could collapse, some of you might have something really nasty to throw at me, and so it's not a 100% done deal that I'm going to make it off the stage at the end of my presentation. But there is some 99.99999, some number of nines percent probability that I'm going to be comfortable with, and hey, I'm here giving the presentation. So in trying to categorize these, and we've heard some of these touched on earlier today, there's the uptime issue, there's the liability issue, and when the operator is in the cab, they are performing some key functions. They are making sure that the odd things that happen, so we've got Halloween coming up October 31st, a small child dressed up as a cornstalk to go trick-or-treating walks out in front of the autonomous combine. Does the autonomous combine classify it as a corn plant, go after it, or does the combine identify it as a child and stop? Does it get stuck in other situations, muddy fields? We've also got the machine health, so the operator is there with smelling and seeing and hearing and feeling, and are able to detect problems with the machine and address them before the machine self-destructs. Similarly with the liability, we've got the operator monitoring for situations. When we look at harvesting, combine fires spreading to become field fires are an issue. And what are the inventions that are out there to mitigate that? Well, we start checking off these corner conditions and machine health and bad things that can happen, and add sensors, add processors, and we're adding the cost up. And as we add parts, we're adding things that can break, so our reliability is going down. And so, what are we going to do to get the cost at a point where the risk and reward for the farmer is going to accept and either lease or buy and deploy the solution to the field. I'll also take this opportunity to address another panel question from this morning, which was the last one, and that was related to, do you think farmers want to have autonomous farms? I've been farming completely autonomously for 21 years, and I'll tell you what it looks like. Cash rent. So what I do is, back in July, I took a look at some data from Minnesota Extension Service. I determined a revenue target for the year. I submitted the revenue target. I got confirmation back in the form of signed leases. And now for the next year, the tillage and planting and crop care and harvesting and marketing is all going to happen. And then in November 1, I'll get a check, and it's probably going to match my revenue target. So the question for the panel then is, do farmers want to be cash rent landlords? So that's been my perspective on what a fully autonomous farm looks like. Thought I would interject it here since it came up earlier in the presentation. Well, in the dirt farming box, besides the industrial monoculture, was regenerative farming, which is kind of an experimental approach right now. A key thing there is cover crops. And when we introduce cover crops, we're going to introduce the need to do planting of multiple varieties of seed, maybe harvesting crop with another crop in the field. We can't do damage, so there's some machine form issues in there. Also we have livestock involved, so we're moving some of the functions from the iron to livestock or to plants. So like the tillage could go to tillage radishes or earthworms, promoting soil health. And then in the crop care, there's some interesting things going on. Allelopathic plants are plants that provide a stink that other insects don't like and repel the insects. There's, instead of see and spray, there's see and peck, where the ducks and chickens are going through and eating insects and then generating fertilizer through their manure. And then I mentioned UCO, which is probably a mispronunciation. UCO Robotics is up in Manitoba, and they manufacture a autonomous chicken tractor, which is basically a self-propelled chicken coop that'll go through and move poultry and other livestock through the field for weed control and pest control. Interplant is making genetics that allow plants to fluoresce. So we've seen some examples of sensors, wireless sensors today, and some of those functions can move from iron and silicon to plants. And then instead of triggering fluorescence for detection by a remote sensing sensor to send in the sprayer, why not just have the plant manufacture the appropriate chemical itself? Now, moving beyond dirt farming, we take a look at what's coming off of the fields, and we can abstract it to being carbohydrates, proteins, oils, and cellulose. And that doesn't necessarily have to come from the field. It could come from a greenhouse. It could come from a enclosed facility with artificial lighting. We can move protein from cows to fish, and we can maybe even take meat tissue and then reproduce that in the lab. Going even a step further, we can produce some of these materials using single-celled organisms. And there's a space agriculture conference coming up in October, and sometimes there's presenters talking about these single-cell producers of the nutritionally interesting or the cellulose for human use. Now moving out another box, we've got sustainability and regeneration. So I view sustainability as maintaining what we have. Regeneration is getting things back and restoring. And we need our air, water, and soil to support life. And so it needs to be done sustainably. And in the case of soil, we've lost roughly half our topsoil in the last 150 years. So it'd be nice to regenerate that and improve soil health. One of the things I'm watching from an inventor's perspective here is the NSF Farms engine and how that's going to be combining indigenous knowledge and particularly of the hunting, gathering, and gardening systems, and then bringing in the Euro-American science, technology, scaling sorts of things. And how can we take the best of both of those approaches and help us meet that target of supporting 10 billion people sustainably. I also want to mention terraforming, and normally we think about that from science fiction and other planets, but it's something that can be done on Earth to challenge the assumption that the amount of tillable acres is declining. And so we look at the Netherlands and how they've been able to reclaim land from the sea, put that into agricultural production. We can go to China, look at how they terrace the mountainsides for, again, sustainable production, and bringing that to North America as maybe some of the glaciers are receding. How do we turn Greenland green again? So invention is seeing needs and filling needs. I've laid out a framework that I use for looking at the inventive space, and there's a lot of patents already out there, and I could take 15 hours to drill down on that. I think people want to go to lunch, so what I will do is I'll refer you to look up some of my patents, and you'll see examples of a lot of these. We also have the things that are going to improve the speed and cost at which we're able to do developments. I'll call out AI-assisted invention. I've got an article that's going to say more about that in the Dakota Digital Review, which is coming out in later this fall. And then also we've got quantum computing, which can really speed things up. And so, currently it takes hundreds of millions of dollars and many years to bring a new machine form, crop, or chemical to the market for agriculture. And that might be significantly reduced. So in conclusion, I said there was nothing, but that's kind of a narrow, pessimistic view. One of the things I haven't mentioned so far is user experience. So besides farmers having trust in it, let's provide a good experience for them, not a frustrating experience to get things running using software. And then with the everything, we've got the technical solutions addressing barriers, and then looking out 25 years and these various boxes, I don't know how it's going to be distributed amongst industrial monoculture, the regenerative farming, the VATs, and so forth, but that'll be left to play out. I'm going to go just a minute over here and give you an example of how the boxes work. Let's go back in time to 1874, so we're going back 150 years. And you can either go yourself or you can bring someone back from that time frame. And the location you're going to bring them back from is the Grand Farm Innovation Campus. So they're standing out there. We had the regenerative and the industrial monoculture. And it's like, how do farming systems switch? And the reverse happened back then. It went from sustainable hunting, gathering, and gardening to industrial monoculture. Well, what happened then? Well, we had mechanization. So instead of autonomy and automation, it was mechanization. The horses went away. And so you didn't have horse barns that were quite so big. And then you didn't have as much manure, and so that accelerated the soil degradation until someone figured out a VAT solution. That is, Haber and Bosch figured out how to get nitrogen from the soil and use that to replace animal manure and guano for the food production. So there's more that can be done on that, but I'm a minute or so over. Lunch is waiting, and so we'll turn it back to Andrew.